Okay, sorry about that. Had some technical issues with the slides. So this is chapter 14, and we'll call this part 1B. In this clip, panic attack interview, which is also available on Blackboard, a clinician interviews an individual who has experienced panic attacks. All of the clips in this section of the class um, are not actors. They're real people who have been diagnosed with a certain disorder or condition, and they've agreed to be filmed so that we can learn what their experience is like. Um, it's often very different than what's portrayed in movies and television actors, and that leads to misunderstanding on the part of the public. Um, Dramas are not obligated to portray things in reality. They portray people in situations in a way to sell tickets or create viewership. Um, so it's very important to see these individuals who are experiencing this disorders, um, and see that they're really not all that different from everybody else.
Could you describe a typical episode?
The first time it happened to me, I was driving down the highway, and I had a kind of a knot in my chest. It felt like I had swallowed something, and it got stuck. And it lasted pretty much overnight, and it was really starting to upset me. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I was having a heart attack. I don't know what a heart attack feels like, but I assume that's what was happening because of all the signs. I felt lightheaded. I felt very panicky. A flushed feeling came over my whole body. I felt as though I was going to pass out.
Well, once you'd had these for a while, did you begin to worry about them, worry about when you were going to have the next one?
Oh, yeah. That was definite concern. I tend to stay away from crowded places. I tend to not go out.
So that individual, if you look back at the DSM criteria for panic attack, he talked about pounding heart. That's one category. Sweating, sensation of choking, chest pain. He says he felt dizzy, lightheaded. He had felt flush, hit chills or heat sensations, and he had these feelings of losing control. So he definitely would qualify as having a panic attack on that one episode just from his description. He also talks about his agoraphobia, how he's afraid to go out, avoids going out because he's concerned really about what will happen should he have another panic attack. Panic attacks are very different. Panic disorder is very different from generalized anxiety disorder because rather than living with this constant anxiety, in a panic disorder, it's this intense, acute experience of anxiety that comes on all of a sudden and is unpredictable. So it's a very different experience of the anxiety. Specific phobia disorder is another variety of anxiety disorder, and everybody's heard of phobias and these kinds of fears. But these is anxiety that is attached to a particular object. So generalized anxiety is free floating. But with specific phobia disorder, there are specific triggers, objects, or situations on which the anxiety is focused. Often these situations are animals, natural environments, situations such as being outside in public, agoraphobia, being injured, and there's many others. Social phobia has been called as the fear of embarrassment in public. Now, the term phobia has kind of gone beyond the DSM. And on Friday the 13th, people always talk about triskaidekaphobia, which is fear of Friday the 13th. The way we use that term phobia in everyday life and discussion is very different than the disorder that is a phobia. Because a phobia is this unrealistic fear and anxiety. It might make sense to have a dislike of snakes, and some people might call it a phobia. But a true phobia is a kind of experience that is debilitating. It takes over one's life. people would avoid situations where there's snakes, and where they do encounter a snake, they pretty much have what could be called a panic attack. There's this intense fear, um, and dread, and they'll behave irrationally. They'll run away and put themselves in danger, perhaps by reacting recklessly to get away from the thing that they fear. Phobias, though, are a bit more common than the other kinds, so they're not often, like you said, the way that we typically use the word phobia. One belief about phobias is that they're caused almost by evolution. That as humans have evolved, we've developed an instinctive predisposition to fear certain stimuli, such as animals or natural environments, such as claustrophobia, fear of enclosed places. And the view is that the human ancestors who did not have these fears were less likely to survive. Um, a proto-human without a fear of enclosed places would uh, be much more likely to get caught in an enclosed place and not pass on those genes. So essentially, it's the genes of those who have experienced some kind of phobia or dislike that have been passed on. That combined with conditioning would seem to explain phobias. Now remember conditioning with little Albert. We talked about little Albert developing a phobia of white rabbits. I don't know if it's fair to say he developed a phobia. He definitely, though, developed a dislike. And as you'll see, that's a difference. His dislike of things, fear of things is normal. Phobias is this irrational fear over and above what the situation may call for. So through conditioning, through experience, one can learn to have this kind of emotional reaction to stimuli. Um, but it's not complete. These two things, preparedness theory and conditioning, don't quite fully explain the prevalence of phobias. For example, in terms of conditioning, not everyone with a bad experience develops the phobia, right? Not every kid in little Albert's situation is going to develop a dislike of the white rat to little Albert's extent. There's people who have bad experience with snakes or enclosed places or heights who do not develop phobias, and that kind of goes against the conditioning argument. Something else against conditioning is that people who do experience a phobia are not more likely than people without a phobia to recall bad experiences. Right? That is, if someone has a phobia for dogs, people with phobia for dogs are not more likely to recall bad experiences with dogs than people without a dog phobia. They recall bad experiences with dogs at about the same rate. Uh, but those two things do give us some sense and can explain at least how some phobic disorders can develop. That'll be the end of this slideshow. Chapter 14, Part 2, will pick up with obsessive compulsive disorders.